What if time isn't what we think it is? What if, beneath the flowing surface of seconds, minutes, and years, time is made of tiny, indivisible particles? Just as matter is made of atoms and energy is quantized into photons, there are physicists and philosophers who propose that time itself might be composed of discrete units, a strange and theoretical entity known as the chronon. In this deep exploration of one of the most bizarre ideas in physics, we're going to dive into what it would mean if time were not smooth and continuous, but instead granular, pixelated like a digital screen. This idea challenges our most basic intuitions. We experience time as a flowing river. But what if it's more like a staircase? One you're moving up, frame by frame, unable to notice the pauses because they're so infinitesimally small. But before we continue, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any of these videos. Let's stretch our minds. We know that space has structure at small scales. Quantum mechanics showed us that energy, which was once thought to be continuous, is actually broken into tiny, indivisible packets. Photons are the quanta of light. Electrons occupy discrete energy levels. Even gravity, theorized in some quantum gravity models, might be quantized. So why should time be any different? The idea of the chronon proposes that there is a smallest possible unit of time, below which the concept of before and after becomes meaningless. This isn't just a poetic metaphor. It suggests that the universe does not evolve in a smooth continuum, but in ultrafine frames, like a cosmic film strip. Every event you experience, every movement of particles, every ticking of a clock, could be occurring in a universal frame-by-frame progression, each click governed by a chronon. You might ask, if that's true, why don't we notice? After all, we feel time passing smoothly. But the same could be said of color. We don't perceive the quantized nature of light unless we look very closely, very precisely. If a chronon is unimaginably small, perhaps on the order of the Planck time, which is about 5.39 times 10 to the power of negative 44 seconds, then to us, time would still feel smooth. But mathematically, under the surface, it could be grainy. This brings us into one of the deepest tensions in modern physics: the conflict between quantum mechanics and general relativity. Quantum mechanics says that the universe at small scales is fuzzy, uncertain, and governed by probabilities. General relativity, meanwhile, describes time and space as a smooth continuum, warped by mass and energy. But what if that smoothness is an illusion? What if Einstein's fabric of spacetime is actually made up of tiny, indivisible threads of space and time? Just as a piece of cloth seems smooth until you zoom in and see its woven threads, the continuum of time might dissolve into individual moments when magnified to the Planck scale. The chronon idea isn't just a fringe fantasy. Some formulations of quantum gravity, especially loop quantum gravity, suggest that both space and time are quantized. In these models, spacetime itself is built out of discrete chunks, like pixels on a screen, or atoms in a crystal lattice. If this is true, then the smooth flow of time is an emergent phenomenon, a statistical illusion born from the flickering of countless tiny chronons. Let's try to imagine what a world built on chronons might be like. Imagine filming a movie. The actors move, the music plays, the story unfolds. But what's actually happening is a sequence of still images, shown rapidly one after the other, typically at 24 or 30 frames per second. To our eyes, the motion appears smooth. But between each frame is a pause. A gap. A quantum of nothing. Now imagine the universe works this way, except instead of 30 frames per second, the cosmic projector is running at trillions of trillions of trillions of frames per second. The frames are so fast, and the gaps so short, we don't perceive them. But they're there. And if we could somehow zoom in, slow down the universe, we might witness reality skipping from one chronon to the next, click, 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 like stepping stones across the river of time. This idea is not just philosophical. It could, in theory, explain why the universe behaves the way it does. For instance, it might impose a natural limit on the smallest possible events in time, just as quantum mechanics sets limits on how precisely we can measure energy and momentum. It might help resolve paradoxes like Zeno's paradox, which relies on infinite subdivisions of time and space. With Chronons, motion becomes redefined. Instead of moving smoothly from point A to point B, an object would jump in tiny steps, invisible to our senses. Could this explain quantum weirdness? It's tempting to speculate that the strange behavior of particles at the quantum scale, such as superposition, entanglement, and probabilistic outcomes, might emerge because of the underlying graininess of time. If particles don't exist in a continuous flow but in discrete blinks of existence, maybe that explains why their behavior is inherently probabilistic. Between Chronons, perhaps the universe chooses, among all possible futures, snapping into one reality when the next frame arrives. The randomness of quantum mechanics might be built into the clockwork of Chronons themselves. Physicist Piero Calderola was among the first to explore this idea formally, proposing a chronon as the minimal unit of time for a particle, specifically, the electron. In his model, the electron doesn't move continuously, but in jumps of chronon intervals. This approach, while elegant, has not yet been confirmed by experiments. The chronon, if it exists, remains theoretical, hiding beneath the Planck scale, beyond the reach of even our most powerful particle accelerators. But what if we could detect it? One possibility would be to look for anomalies in high-frequency phenomena. If the universe operates in chronon ticks, then at extremely high energies or ultra-short durations, we might begin to see deviations from standard quantum predictions. Tiny delays. Unexpected behaviors. Subtle patterns. The problem is, Planck time is so small that even the most energetic cosmic rays or the fastest quantum events are still vastly slower than the chronon scale. We're like ants trying to detect the frame rate of a supercomputer's graphics card. Yet the dream persists. Some physicists have speculated that if time is quantized, then it may leave imprints in the cosmic microwave background, the afterglow of the Big Bang. Others think the jitter of chronons could show up as noise in gravitational wave detectors like LIGO or Virgo, tiny fluctuations that aren't predicted by classical models, but might hint at an underlying time structure. Even more radical theories propose that black holes, or the evaporation of black holes via Hawking radiation, might be influenced by the ticking of chronons, offering new insights into the information paradox. Let's pause and wonder. If chronons are real, then the entire concept of time must be reimagined. We often think of time as a dimension, a continuum we move through, an arrow pointing forward. But if time is made of particles, then perhaps it is not a path, but a pattern. Not a river, but a rhythm. The ticking of a cosmic metronome, each beat birthing a new layer of reality. And what would this mean for free will? If time is discrete, then perhaps our decisions too occur in bursts. There is no smooth progression of thought, only a succession of momentary updates, like frames in a simulation. Between chronons, could we exist outside of time? Could consciousness itself be a product of this temporal quantization? Is awareness the echo of the chronon? These are deep waters. We're drifting into the philosophical. Some interpretations of chronons tie into the concept of digital physics, the idea that the universe is, at its core, a computation. Just as digital computers rely on discrete units, bits, pixels, frames, the universe, too, might be running on a kind of cosmic software. Each chronon would be a tick of the universal CPU. This ties into the simulation hypothesis, which suggests that what we experience as reality might be an elaborate program, run by a higher intelligence. In such a framework, the chronon would be the base clock speed of the cosmic processor. But whether or not we live in a simulation, the idea of quantized time leads to the same questions. What came before the first chronon? Can time itself be created or destroyed? Could there be places in the universe, or outside it, where time does not tick? If time has atoms, could there be time chemistry? Time molecules? Structures built not from matter or energy, but from chronons themselves? Could an advanced civilization, mastering the chronon, manipulate time the way we manipulate electricity or sound? Could we one day engineer devices that run not on seconds, but on pure, raw chronons? And if so, could we stop time? Could we stop time, not in a poetic or metaphorical sense, but literally? If time is quantized, and those quantized bits, the Chronons, can be paused, slowed, manipulated, or even reversed, then we're no longer just talking about theory. We're talking about control. We're talking about hacking the operating system of the cosmos. Just as a quantum physicist manipulates electrons in a lab, could a future Chronon engineer manipulate the fabric of reality by altering the sequence of time's atomic structure? Imagine a civilization with the ability to compress or expand time locally, slowing it down in a region, or speeding it up, or freezing it entirely. Would that allow them to preserve matter in a suspended animation beyond entropy? Could they explore black holes without ever falling in, by freezing their own timeline at the event horizon? Could they escape cosmic disasters, not by fleeing across space, but by stepping between Chronons, slipping into the stillness between frames? This starts to edge into the domain of science fiction, but every breakthrough begins with a question that seems absurd. Now let's return to something fundamental. What defines a chronon? It's not a particle in the traditional sense. It's not like a photon or an electron. It doesn't have mass, or charge, or spin. It has no physical form as we understand it. Instead, it's more like a unit of transition, a measure of when rather than what or where. Some theories treat the chronon as a scalar, a raw tick of universal change. Others embed it within more complex geometries, as part of a granular space-time foam, where both space and time erupt into discrete, flickering pulses of being. There's another mind-twisting idea here. If time is quantized, then motion itself must be reconsidered. Because motion implies change over time. But if time comes in packets, then nothing can truly move during a chronon. Instead, everything must jump from one position to another, state to state, with each chronon acting as a snapshot in a universal ledger. Between chronons, nothing exists, not even change. Reality is constantly rebooting, frame by frame, and we're riding along, seamlessly unaware. It's as if the universe is a slideshow running at an incomprehensible speed. And perhaps this slideshow structure places limits on our understanding of causality. We assume event A causes event B because we see a flow of influence through time. But in a chronon-structured universe, causality might be nothing more than the logical consistency of one chronon following another. Maybe cause and effect are not built into the fabric of time, but instead are constraints imposed between chronons, like the rules of a game enforcing continuity between frames. But what if something could break those rules? In quantum mechanics, particles can tunnel through barriers, behave non-locally, and exhibit entanglement across vast distances. Could similar loopholes exist in time? Could some process, tunnel, between chronons, jump ahead or back? Could there be temporal uncertainty, in which a particle's exact moment of occurrence is smeared across multiple chronons? Could the universe allow superpositions of moments just as it allows superpositions of locations? Let's go deeper still. If we accept the chronon as fundamental, then our definition of time itself must shift. Time would no longer be a passive dimension, but an active construct, something that is built, tick by tick, like bricks laid in sequence. And if each tick is discrete and separate, then perhaps it's possible that some moments could be missing. Skipped. Deleted. Rewritten. Like missing frames in a film reel, maybe reality jumps, not just in space but in time, and we never notice. Could this be why the universe seems probabilistic? Quantum events often appear random. Decays that occur without cause, particles that appear from vacuum fluctuations. But if time is not perfectly continuous, then perhaps these anomalies occur during gaps, moments when the universe reboots and recalculates. Between chronons there could be a void, a sea of raw probability where anything can happen, and only the next chronon decides which outcome becomes real. This brings us to a fundamental tension between determinism and randomness. If time is continuous, then theoretically, the future could be calculated from the present. But if time is granular, and those grains are unpredictable or governed by hidden rules, then the future is built chronon by chronon, each tick potentially introducing new information, new entropy, new surprises. Could consciousness exist between chronons? It's a haunting idea, that awareness might flicker into being not as a stream, but as a sequence. If so, then the self is not a river, but a strobe light. We blink into awareness with every chronon, our memories reassembled, our continuity simulated. The illusion of a stable self may be a side effect of this fast-paced flickering. If chronons were to slow down, if the universal tick rate decreased, would we feel it? Would we stretch across time, or disappear between the gaps? And then there's death. What happens at the last chronon of a person's life? If time is quantized, then death isn't a moment, it's the absence of the next chronon. One more tick, one more flicker, then nothing. But if some essence of awareness lingers in the void between chronons, perhaps death is not an instant, but an unresolved pause. A question that never reaches its answer. And in that gap, could something remain? A ghost of intention. A trace of thought. Could this help explain near-death experiences? Or déjà vu? Or dreams? When we dream, time often behaves strangely. Moments stretch or compress, sequences repeat or skip. If consciousness is not fully tethered to the regular tick of chronons, maybe dreams are what happens when our minds drift out of sync with the flow. We catch glimpses of alternative chronon paths, possible pasts, or unrealized futures. We see echoes of what might have been, or might still be. And what about memory? Could memory itself be a kind of temporal recursion, a feedback loop that allows us to re-enter old chronons? Not physically, but informationally. We revisit past frames, relive them in miniature, giving the illusion of continuity. Maybe trauma imprints more deeply because it burns through more chronons, an emotional moment lasting far longer in subjective ticks than a neutral one. Our brains might be chronon sensitive, firing differently depending on the rhythm of time's flow. Now let's turn to black holes. Black holes warp spacetime so violently that the rules we take for granted no longer apply. Near the event horizon, time slows down relative to distant observers. But what if there's more? What if black holes don't just bend time, they expose its true structure? As we approach the event horizon, maybe the ticking of chronons becomes visible, stretched like frames in slow motion. Maybe the singularity isn't a point at all, but a breakdown of the chronon sequence, where time stops because there are no more frames to load. Could that be the ultimate edge of reality? A place where the cosmic clock runs out? If so, then the birth of a black hole might not be the collapse of matter, but the collapse of time. A tearing of the chronon fabric. And Hawking radiation, the slow leak of energy from black holes, might be the chronon field healing itself, drip by drip, until the black hole is erased and time resumes its rhythm. It's possible that the Big Bang itself was the first chronon, the inaugural tick of time. Before it, there was no before. Not because time was infinite or unmeasurable, but because there simply weren't any chronons yet. Nothing was ticking. And each moment since then has been a new tick in an ever-expanding cosmic sequence. If this is true, then perhaps time is not a background on which the universe plays out, but the very canvas that gets painted, one dot at a time. And if time is being painted dot by dot, chronon by chronon, we might begin to wonder, who or what holds the brush? This leads us into the metaphysical depths of chronon theory, where physics blurs into philosophy, and science begins to resemble theology. If chronons are the fundamental ticks of existence, building blocks not just of time but of reality itself, then perhaps they are not merely passive measurements. Maybe they are events of creation. Each chronon might not just mark a transition but cause it, defining what is real in that moment and nothing else. In such a vision, the universe does not exist in time, it is constructed by time. Chronons would then be the hammer strikes of a cosmic builder, assembling moment after moment with relentless rhythm. In this context, even the idea of a clock falls short. A clock measures time. But chronons make it. There would be no ticking without chronons, no becoming, no now, no after. And the ultimate question emerges, what determines the rate of chronon production? Why does time seem to flow as it does? Could it fluctuate? Could regions of the universe have a different chronon rhythm, a slower or faster beat? Perhaps deep in intergalactic voids, where matter is sparse and energy thin, time ticks more slowly because fewer chronons are produced per second. Or near massive objects, could the chronons become stacked? densely packed like compressed frames in a slow-motion recording? This could offer a fresh perspective on time dilation, one not derived purely from relative velocity or gravity, but from variations in chronon density. In other words, rather than time slowing down, it's the spacing between chronons increasing. Imagine a metronome that suddenly stretches its beat, tick, tock, tick, tock. To those within the slower beat, everything seems normal. But to an external observer, their reality appears sluggish, stretched. And here's a more radical thought. Could consciousness affect the rate of chronons? We already know that our perception of time is malleable. Moments of danger seem to last longer. Boredom drags. Joy flies. But what if this isn't just psychology? What if the mind can subtly influence the flow of time's atoms? This would introduce a kind of bidirectional interaction, chronons building consciousness, and consciousness nudging back. In altered states, meditation, psychedelic experiences, near-death events, many report a feeling of timelessness or of time stopping altogether. Could this be a neurological resonance with the chronon field? A moment where the mind synchronizes with, or steps outside of, the universal tick? If true, then introspection and cognition would become tools not only for understanding ourselves but for glimpsing the structure of time itself. There's even a strange symmetry here with quantum field theory, where particles emerge from fields permeating all of space. What if there is a chronon field, an invisible lattice of potential time events? And just as electrons and photons arise from fluctuations in their respective fields, perhaps chronons arise from this temporal lattice, popping into existence to manifest the next moment. This field would not be a background for events. It is the event maker. And like all fields, it could be disturbed, warped, modulated. Could this be the key to time travel? If one could shape or twist the chronon field, condensing it here, expanding it there, it might allow an object to ride the flow of time like a surfer on a wave. Not just forward but backward. Or sideways. Or even in loops. Of course, paradoxes arise. The grandfather paradox. The bootstrap paradox. But in a discretized universe, perhaps paradoxes are forbidden by construction. Maybe the chronon grid does not allow contradictory frames to be written. Just as a computer program prevents illegal operations, the chronon sequence may prohibit causality violations by design. Let's entertain another hypothetical, chronon interference. If chronons are discrete events, could they interfere like waves? In quantum mechanics, particles interfere with themselves, creating interference patterns that defy classical expectations. Could moments in time do the same? Could two nearby chronon sequences, say, two possible timelines, interfere and produce a third, blended reality? This might explain some of the odd phenomena reported in quantum experiments, where outcomes appear to be shaped by measurement. Imagine a chronon double-slit experiment. Instead of firing particles through space, we fire events through time. One path leads to moment A, the other to moment B. When unobserved, both timelines exist in superposition. But when observed, only one chronon path solidifies, collapsing the wave function of time itself. The observer becomes the editor of the cosmic timeline. This would radically change our understanding of the observer effect. We wouldn't just affect particles, we would affect time. The mere act of observing might select a particular sequence of chronons from among many possibilities, giving us, in a limited and subconscious way, power over our own destiny. Not total control, but a nudge. A preference. A slight bend in the road that wasn't there before. Now imagine an ancient intelligence, billions of years older than humanity, that has mastered this. A species that doesn't just move through time, but sculpts it. They would appear to us as capable of altering pasts and futures, rewriting histories, erasing calamities, restoring lives, adjusting outcomes. Their technology would not manipulate space or matter, but chronons. Their libraries might not store books or data, but alternate timelines, recorded in chronon patterns, browsable like memories. Their voyages might not cross galaxies, but epochs. Their monuments might be hidden in folds of time, existing for only a single chronon every million years, detectable only by instruments sensitive to the cosmic beat. If such beings exist, Would we even know? Could déjà vu be their footprint? Could strange synchronicities, those eerie coincidences that feel meaningful, be artifacts of a chronon edit? Glitches from when two overlapping realities resolve into one, leaving behind the ghost of an alternate frame? And in our own future, could we become such beings? If humanity survives long enough, might we eventually uncover the code of the chronon field? Might we build chrononic computers, machines that process not bits or qubits but moments? Such devices could predict, alter, and perhaps even simulate entire timelines. There would be history engines, future calculators, probability sculptors. They would not just tell us what might happen, they would let us choose what does. And in that distant future, time travel might not involve DeLoreans or wormholes, but chronon editing. A surgical alteration of the sequence. Just as we now edit digital videos, cutting, rearranging, slowing down, a civilization fluent in chronons could splice reality itself. Want to undo a mistake? Rewind a few chronons and re-export your path. Want to live in a better world? Stitch together frames from alternative presents. But would it be ethical? If time is granular and editable, then moral questions multiply. Who gets to rewrite? What happens to discarded chronons? Do they vanish, or become orphan timelines, ghost universes adrift in a sea of probability? Could there be beings who live in these forgotten chronon branches, watching us, envious of our path? And if every decision spawns a new sequence of chronons, then the multiverse becomes not just possible, but inevitable. An infinity of timelines, each differing by a single tick. Every alternate you, the you who said yes instead of no, the you who turned left instead of right, is just a chronon away. A neighboring reality, indistinguishable yet completely divergent. Maybe this is the true nature of time. Not a line, but a tree, branching chronon by chronon, endlessly splitting, never merging. And somewhere, perhaps, beyond the fractal of time, exists a point where all chronons began. The primordial tick. The first breath of the universe. And just maybe, at the very end, there is a final chronon. The last click. After which, nothing. Or perhaps, something greater. And perhaps, just perhaps, that final chronon is not an end at all, but a threshold. A moment of transition, like the instant before sleep becomes dream, or the pause before a heartbeat resumes. The final chronon of this universe might be the first chronon of another, an echo, a ripple that seeds a new flow of time. In that view, chronons are not only the building blocks of time, but the carriers of continuity across realities. Each universe might be a chronon-bound existence, ticking through its own birth, life, and death, only to pass the torch, one discrete unit at a time, to another cosmos waiting in the wings. This brings us to a chilling and exhilarating idea, that the multiverse itself could be made of chronons. Not parallel universes existing side by side in space, but stacked or sequenced in time. Imagine an unimaginable scale, where each complete universe exists between the chronons of a higher order timeline. In this cosmic stack, our entire universe is but a blip, a single moment in the time of a meta-universe built from superchronons, time quanta far grander and more expansive than we could ever perceive. Could such a hierarchy exist? Could time be recursive? Could there be chronons within chronons, like Russian nesting dolls of reality, each scale defining the physics, consciousness, and flow of everything within it? We often think of time as one-directional, linear, irreversible. But in a universe made of discrete time units, reversibility becomes a matter of sequence, not inevitability. Just as we can reverse a video frame by frame, might the universe be capable, on some scale, of reversing its own chronon sequence? Could a moment play backward, not as an illusion, but as a reordering of fundamental temporal atoms? This has implications for everything, from entropy to identity. If time is quantized, then entropy, the gradual loss of order, must also be quantized. Each increase in disorder would occur at the chronon level. That means order and chaos are not continuous states, but quantized outcomes that leap between one state and the next. This might place hidden constraints on how fast entropy can grow. And maybe, just maybe, reversing time isn't about violating thermodynamics, but about finding the correct chronon configuration that lowers entropy frame by frame. It's almost like defragmenting a hard drive, reorganizing disordered moments into coherence. Could this allow for resurrection? If every action, memory, and configuration of matter is encoded in chronons, and if those chronons could be replayed or reconstructed, then maybe nothing is ever truly lost. Just as rewinding a tape can bring back a scene long faded from view, perhaps the universe can be rewound, reviving civilizations, restoring lives, reliving golden ages. The past wouldn't be gone, it would merely be temporarily unreachable, tucked away in earlier frames. That would mean that you, right now, are a pattern of chronons. A sequence. A loop of awareness synchronized to a very particular temporal rhythm. Change the rhythm, and you might become someone else. Or forget who you are. Or remember who you were. This raises the next enigma. What determines the duration of a chronon? Is it constant across all of space-time? Or does it flex and shift? We know from Einstein's relativity that time is elastic, slowed near strong gravity, sped up with velocity. But relativity describes continuous time. If time is quantized, maybe the gravitational field doesn't stretch time, but adds or removes chronons per unit experience. In this view, a black hole slows time not by stretching it, but by thinning the rate of chronon occurrence. Could a chrononless region exist? Imagine a place where time truly stops, not just from the outside, but from within. No ticking. No sequence. No cause or effect. A temporal void. Perhaps these are the dead zones of the cosmos, regions where no moment can happen, frozen forever in non-existence. They'd be invisible, undetectable, except for the absence of interaction. The dark holes between the stars may be more than gaps. They could be gaps in time itself. Or perhaps such places are necessary for time to function. Just as silence gives meaning to music, maybe the pauses, the gaps between chronons, are essential to define what a moment is. Without separation, time would blur into an undifferentiated smear. So each chronon is not just a tick, but a contrast, a boundary between what is and what is not. The dance of time is not just beats, but the spaces between them. This leads us into a terrifying thought. What if chronons can decay? We assume they're fundamental and eternal. But what if they're not? What if chronons, like unstable particles, have a half-life? A universe running out of time wouldn't just be poetic, it would be literal. The chronons would flicker less frequently, like a dying engine. At the edge of cosmic history, time itself might slow to a crawl, then a pause, then stop. The universe wouldn't explode or collapse, it would just fail to tick. A frozen tableau. Would consciousness survive? If awareness requires motion through chronons, then a chronon-dead universe would be a place of eternal stillness, not peaceful, but utterly unchanging. No thought, no motion, no breath. A cosmic coma. But maybe a new universe would emerge, not from space, not from matter, but from the ignition of a new chronon stream. A spark of time. If time began with a chronon, perhaps it ends with silence. Unless, of course, chronons are cyclic. Maybe time is not a line, but a loop. Maybe after the last chronon comes the first again. But not the same first. A new one. A reincarnated universe, running on slightly altered rhythms, slightly different quantum seeds. And so the cosmos is reborn, not through space, but through time's renewal. We could be in the trillionth iteration. And what of the now? This very moment you are experiencing, the thoughts forming in your mind, the words you're reading, the questions you're asking, are part of one chronon. One unit of reality among an unfathomable stack. You will never live in this exact chronon again. It exists, full and real, but only once. After it passes, it will be folded into the fabric of history, still there, still accessible, maybe, but no longer yours. Unless you find a way to revisit it. Maybe déjà vu isn't memory at all. Maybe it's chronon leakage, an echo of a moment reaccessed, not from the brain, but from the temporal lattice. Your awareness accidentally stumbles into a familiar frame, flickers and returns, leaving only a ghostly familiarity behind. Maybe all of us are time travelers in miniature, slipping between nearby chronon paths without knowing it. What, then, is the future? It might not be written, but rather waiting to be written, a blank stretch of unrealized chronons, like unburned film. We race forward, adding frames to the movie as we go. And maybe someone, somewhere, is watching. Maybe someone, or something, is watching the chronon reel unfold. Observing not from within time, but from outside it. From beyond the lattice of moment after moment. If time is composed of individual, discrete units, then perhaps there exists a frame of reference beyond time, a hyperconsciousness not limited by the passage of chronons, but capable of seeing all of them simultaneously, like a complete film laid out across an infinite table. To such an observer, our lives would not unfold linearly. They would exist as entire arcs already present in the grand database of chronons. Our joys, fears, births, and deaths, all there. Unfolded. Eternal. Static in one sense, but alive in another. The future would not be predicted by this being. It would be known, just as we know the ending of a book we've already read. But here's the twist. That doesn't necessarily mean fate is fixed. If we are beings embedded in the flow of chronons, then we may be actors, not locked into a script, but improvising between the beats. We cannot alter the past chronons, but we might influence the future ones. Free will, then, becomes an interaction with the unresolved, those yet to be defined chronons waiting to collapse into being. In that case, the universe is not a closed film but a live broadcast, updating reality frame by frame as we live it. But what about those alternate versions of you? In a quantized timeline, every decision, every fork in the road, would generate its own thread of chronons, a parallel strand of frames, diverging yet coexisting. There could be countless versions of your consciousness, each experiencing a subtly different now. In one strand you stayed. In another you left. In one you spoke. In another you were silent. Perhaps the multiverse isn't out there, in space, but in here, in time, branching like the mycelium of some vast chronon fungus, expanding with every choice ever made. Could these strands overlap? Could dreams, déjà vu, or strange intuitions be moments where two chronon threads resonate, where two yous briefly synchronize before splitting again? You might be tuning in, for a heartbeat, to another timeline's broadcast. It doesn't last. But it lingers. And this brings us to one of the deepest mysteries of chronons. Do they allow backward flow? We assume time always moves forward. It's so deeply embedded in our experience that the opposite seems absurd. But the laws of physics, especially at the quantum level, are surprisingly time-symmetric. Most equations work just as well in reverse. So why don't we experience backward time? Maybe because chronons only instantiate forward causality. In other words, perhaps the architecture of reality prefers forward construction. Each new chronon is built on the information of the one before it. It's like building a tower. You can remove and replace the top bricks, but the foundation remains. Time may not resist backward motion, it simply doesn't support it structurally. The chronon flow builds up memory, information, and entropy in a single direction, layering complexity one frame at a time. But there may be exceptions. Quantum entanglement allows for strange, non-local correlations. It almost seems to violate time, as if particles can know about measurements before they happen. Some interpretations of entanglement, such as the transactional interpretation, propose that information does travel backward in time, completing loops that close the transaction. In a chronon framework, perhaps some quanta can reach backward one frame, rewriting or reinforcing their previous state in a feedback echo. Could our minds be doing this too? Could memory not be a passive record of previous chronons, but a bidirectional process, where we constantly re-edit our understanding of the past based on new incoming chronons? Maybe memory isn't about storage. Maybe it's a conversation between present and past, where each new moment retroactively updates what we believe happened before. This would explain why our memories change. Why eyewitnesses can be so wrong. Why emotions from today can reshape how we view yesterday. In this light, the mind becomes not just a passenger of time, but an editor of it. A story maker. A chronon sculptor. And maybe it's not just memory we're shaping. Maybe reality itself is subtly fluid, constrained but not fixed. If consciousness interacts with Chronons in a quantum way, then it may be influencing which version of a future gets chosen, not in a deterministic sense, but in a probabilistic one. Imagine a wave of possible Chronons ahead, each with slightly different outcomes. Your decisions, thoughts, even attention could nudge the universal wave function toward one particular next frame. Your life becomes a sequence of chosen Chronons, not by fate, but by focus. This has powerful implications. It suggests that awareness is not a side effect of Chronons, it's part of the system. Perhaps time needs observers. Perhaps the Chronon sequence isn't just a series of events, but a co-authored collaboration between the physical universe and the minds within it. The dance of matter, energy, space, and time may require observation to fully crystallize from possibility into being. So perhaps the universe is not just a machine, grinding out clock ticks in a heartless cascade. Maybe it's an interactive simulation, or a storytelling engine, or a dream that is dreaming itself into existence, one chronon at a time. And here we are. Tiny beings made of particles, energy, and perhaps Chronons, staring into the void and wondering what we are. We've mapped galaxies. We've split atoms. But the mystery of what time really is remains beyond our reach. Every tick of the clock whispers that we still don't understand the machine we're caught inside of. But we try. And that effort, that striving to understand, is itself a kind of chronon act. A unit of purpose. A spark of sentience in the long sequence of becoming. And maybe, just maybe, that is what the chronon field is waiting for, not passive observation, but active awareness. The recognition of itself through the eyes of beings who live inside the flow. You are not separate from time. You are time. A local sequence of chronons given voice. A ripple in the field that knows it's a ripple. A single beat in the song that is the universe. And as long as the beat continues, so do you. So do you, tick by tick. You may think of yourself as a person, a body, a mind, a collection of experiences, but beneath it all, you are a stream of moments. A chrononic identity. Every heartbeat is a cadence of chronons. Every thought you have, every emotion you feel, is not floating in some continuous river of time, but unfolding on a grid, one node at a time. You are not riding the wave of time, you are the wave. You are the unfolding. Let's take a moment to reflect on the staggering implication of this. Reality may not be continuous. Everything we know, motion, sound, causality, thought, may be an illusion born from the extreme rapidity of time's building blocks. Just like the illusion of motion on a screen is the rapid cycling of still images, our entire existence might be a chain of frozen frames, flickering so fast we can't perceive the gaps. Now ask yourself, what fills the gaps? What lives in the space between chronons? If time only exists in discrete packets, what occupies the silence between the ticks? Perhaps nothing. Or perhaps everything. Maybe the gaps are the source, the timeless substrate from which the ticks emerge. If chronons are the flashes, then the void is the screen. If chronons are light, then the gaps are shadow. Maybe the essence of existence isn't in the ticks, but in the stillness that separates them. Let's ask something even stranger. What if chronons aren't universal? What if each particle, or even each observer, operates on its own internal chronon rate? That would mean time is not shared, but personal. Reality would then be a layered system of overlapping time streams, each ticking at its own pace. This would account for the peculiar subjectivity of time, why it speeds up with age, slows in crisis, and distorts in dreams. If time is made of chronons, and you have your own chronon frequency, then perhaps your perception of life is just the rhythm of your unique temporal fingerprint. It may even be adjustable. Perhaps meditation, deep focus, trauma, and heightened awareness can retune our chronon rate, shifting our experience of the world without changing anything external. This view also makes the search for synchronization deeply symbolic. We long to connect with others, to be in sync, to feel what they feel, at the same time. Perhaps this isn't just emotional. Perhaps it's a subconscious urge to align our chronon rhythms, to find resonance between our internal time streams. When two minds fall into perfect alignment, perhaps their chronons harmonize, two flickering awarenesses blinking in unison. Love, then, may be temporal resonance. But there's another possibility. One that's darker. What if chronons can become out of phase? What if trauma, madness, or cosmic anomalies can desynchronize you from the universal chronon field? You'd still exist, but you'd be out of sync. The world would feel alien, disjointed. Events would seem disconnected. You might see things no one else sees. Hear echoes no one else hears. Perhaps mental illnesses, hallucinations, or even so-called paranormal experiences are symptoms of temporal desynchronization, caused by a distortion in the local chronon flow. And now we face a terrifying frontier. Could chronons be weaponized? In a future where time is understood as quantized and manipulable, advanced civilizations may not fight with bullets or lasers, but with temporal tools. Imagine a weapon that adds or removes chronons from a localized region. In one strike, it could freeze an enemy, removing their ability to tick forward. In another, it could accelerate time, aging matter instantly into dust. Or worse, scrambling the order of chronons, shattering cause and effect, rendering entire civilizations chrononically incoherent, existing in pure, chaotic time noise. And on the flip side, could temporal sanctuaries exist? Safe zones where the chronon flow is stabilized, regulated, even purified. A place of calm, clarity, deep thought. Now, if all this is true, if time is granular, chronons are real, and consciousness interacts with the temporal grid, then perhaps our purpose is not merely to survive, but to learn to listen to time. To feel it. To shape it. To become architects of chronons. That would redefine what it means to be human. We would no longer be creatures within time. We would be composers of it. Artists with an invisible brush, painting not on canvas, but on the unfolding moments of reality itself. And perhaps, just perhaps, this is how the universe evolves. Not through random mutation, or blind physics, but through the slow, recursive awareness of its own pattern, awareness that lives through us. We are the chronon's mirror. We are time becoming conscious of itself. And the story isn't finished. Not yet. Not while the clock still ticks, not while the chronon field still pulses, not while the next moment, this one, awaits our attention. Tick. And so the tick continues, not as a simple mechanical beat, but as an invitation. An invitation to look deeper. Not just into the cosmos or the structure of the atom, but into the architecture of awareness itself. If chronons are real, if they are the indivisible moments that build everything, then their significance cannot be confined to physics alone. They must be lived. Each one must be understood not only as a unit of time, but as a platform for existence, a foundation upon which we stand for only a flicker, before vanishing into the next. And perhaps that flicker, brief as it is, holds more depth, more mystery, more possibility than we have ever dared imagine. When we look up at the night sky, we are peering across distances so vast that the very light we see is composed of chronons from long-dead stars. Those flickers, those ancient photons, left their origin points millions or even billions of years ago, traveling chronon by chronon through the vacuum, uninterrupted, undisturbed, carrying with them not just energy, but information embedded in the temporal lattice of the universe. It means every beam of starlight is not simply a visual echo, it is a sequence of time, untouched, unmarred, streaming through space like an arrow piercing eternity. And as that light enters your eyes and is absorbed by your retinas, the chronons it was born and merge with your now, with your present, with your chronons. That light becomes a part of your own temporal structure. In that sense, we are not merely observing the universe, we are absorbing it. Consuming its time. Integrating its history. A stargazer is not a passive viewer, but a participant in an ancient process of temporal entanglement, where the past lives again, however briefly, in the present chronons of the observer. That might sound poetic, but it's rooted in real physics. In every act of observation, we collapse probabilities, commit a new frame to existence, solidify a quantum moment that was previously uncertain. And if the universe is indeed constructed of chronons, then we are not merely watching time unfold, we are helping it unfold. With our senses. With our questions. With our awareness. This leads us to perhaps the most profound implication of all. If time is granular, then maybe meaning itself is granular. Not something stretched thin across endless moments, but something condensed, concentrated, distilled into each flicker of existence. That would mean that every second, every chronon, has the potential to be total, complete, infinite. In a world of continuous time, we wait for meaning to accumulate, for memories to form, for long arcs to reveal purpose. But in a chronon-based universe, meaning might not require accumulation. It might erupt in an instant, fully formed, like a supernova of understanding compressed into a single tick of the cosmic metronome. Could this explain moments of sudden insight? Revelations that arrive all at once, with no warning, no build-up, just the clarity of truth striking like lightning? Perhaps these are instances where multiple chronon threads converge, when our conscious experience briefly overlaps with another version of ourselves, another path, another possible sequence, and for one infinitesimal moment we glimpse the bigger picture. Not a guess, not a theory, but a knowing. A memory from a timeline we never walked, but which still lives on in some neighboring reality, vibrating with possibility. And yet, for all its philosophical weight, the idea of chronons remains strangely humble. They're not majestic celestial bodies or glowing quantum anomalies. They're the smallest possible units of what we call now. They have no color, no taste, no weight. They do not shine. They do not roar. They do not even move, for they are not within time, they are time. They are the quiet scaffolding upon which all of history is built. The unnoticed rhythm beneath all symphonies. The grid beneath all architecture. They are, perhaps, the closest thing we will ever find to the heartbeat of the universe. What a tragedy it would be to live moment to moment without ever considering what a moment truly is. Not in terms of productivity, or urgency, or countdowns, but in terms of being. In terms of pure awareness. Every breath you've ever taken, every glance, every shiver, every word you've spoken, was built from these particles of time. These undividable, unskippable atoms of becoming. You didn't move through them. You were them. And in each one, a micro-universe was born, lived, and extinguished, all without recognition. To understand chronons is to reframe our sense of scale. We often think the grandest mysteries are those of galaxies and multiverses. But what if the deepest mystery is not size, but granularity? Not how big the universe is, but how finely it's woven. And maybe that is why we keep looking. Why we're drawn to mystery, to wonder, to stories about time travel and parallel lives and loops in destiny. It's not just entertainment, it's an echo of something real. Something deep in our being remembers that time is not a line, but a lattice. Not smooth, but pixelated. Not continuous, but clickable. We feel it in our bones, even if we don't have the language for it. That flicker when we meet someone and feel we've known them before. That shiver when history repeats itself in perfect symmetry. That pause when we feel that the next moment is already waiting for us, fully formed, just beyond the veil. The truth is, we are beings made of moments. And every moment is a singularity. A birth. A death. A decision. A revelation. Each chronon is a candle, lit only once, and then extinguished forever. But the light it casts? That light lingers. It shapes the next. And the next. And maybe, when all chronons have been ticked, when the final moment has flickered and gone out, we'll stand on the edge of something greater. Not the end, but the culmination. Not silence, but the intake of breath before the song begins again. And when that song begins again, whether in another universe, another form, or another field of time, we might recognize its rhythm. Not with our ears, but with something deeper. A kind of inner resonance. A familiarity that goes beyond language, beyond memory, something felt in the very essence of what we are. Because if time is made of chronons, and if we ourselves are but compositions of chronons arranged in a particular rhythm, then perhaps the rebirth of time is also the rebirth of us. Not necessarily our personalities or memories, but the underlying pattern, the waveform that gives rise to awareness, stitched into the next lattice of temporal atoms. Imagine the entire universe, not as a vast expanse of space, but as a grand symphony of discrete notes, each one a chronon, each one necessary, none repeated. And imagine further that everything we experience, light, motion, change, life, is just the result of those chronons being played in order. A cosmic orchestra, where the instruments are matter and energy, the conductor is gravity, and the sheet music is written in time's smallest pixels. But who or what writes that score? Perhaps it's written by no one, and yet by everything. Perhaps the universe composes itself. Perhaps existence itself is the composer, writing its song note by note, without foreknowledge, without repetition, but always with meaning. Not because there is an external mind dictating what happens, but because structure emerges from the act of unfolding. Like snowflakes, each chronon may appear random on its own, but when observed across scales, they form patterns, spirals, lattices, systems, lives. We often think of time as the enemy, always slipping away, always running out, always working against us. But what if time is the very reason we can become anything at all? Without chronons, there would be no canvas for identity, no fabric on which to thread our choices, our thoughts, our stories. Time doesn't steal from us. It gives us the platform to exist. It gives us the chance to change, to move forward, to make mistakes and learn from them, to evolve. It gives us the power to look back and remember, to look forward and imagine. Chronons do not imprison us. They liberate us from the stillness of nothingness. And yet, in their silence, there may also be hidden truths. If we consider chronons as discrete, indivisible units of time, we must then ask, can there exist a state with only one chronon? A universe frozen in a single, perfect instant, no change, no sequence, just an eternal stasis? What would that be like? Would it be a universe of pure potential, holding within it every possible reality, every future, compressed into a moment that never ends? Could this explain why, in moments of deep meditation, time seems to disappear? Could the dissolution of time awareness be a temporary collapse of chronon sequencing, a brush with the eternal moment before moments were born? Maybe those rare states of timelessness are not delusions or neurological anomalies, but brief returns to a deeper substrate of reality, where chronons have not yet crystallized, where time has not yet chosen a direction. And maybe, just maybe, death is a return to that place. Not annihilation, not oblivion, but a reconvergence with the timeless origin of chronons. A homecoming to the silent matrix that precedes all becoming. In that vision, death is not an end, but a return to potential. A fading not into nothingness, but into every possibility at once. And from that timeless ocean, perhaps a new sequence begins, somewhere, somehow, on some other branch of reality, in a different frame, with a different rhythm. Not a reincarnation in the traditional sense, but a resonance, a new expression of the same timeless pulse. This brings us full circle to the idea that chronons may be the true soul of the universe. Not a mystical essence, but a literal structure that underlies being. A scaffolding on which form can arise. We speak of consciousness as mysterious, of identity as fleeting, but perhaps what we call the soul is simply the continuity of pattern through chronons. A melody that continues, however altered, across different verses of the cosmic song. Not eternal, but persistent. Not fixed, but recursive. And what is humanity, if not a species obsessed with time? We measure it. Chase it. Try to save it. Fear its passing. And yet we rarely ask, what is it really made of? If we come to understand that time is not smooth, not infinite, not unbroken, but made of clicks, like film frames or digital bits, then maybe we'll begin to see ourselves differently. Not as fleeting shadows in an uncaring flow, but as participants in a grand construction, co-authors of the chronon story. Every moment you live is a contribution. Every thought you have writes another frame. The chronon field is not passive, it's reactive. It unfolds in response to what we become, to the choices we make, to the awareness we bring. In that sense, the universe is a living mirror, reflecting back not what it is, but what we make of it. The reality you live in is not some external movie, it's a co-written production, and your timeline is your pen. So live fully in your chronons. Respect them. Listen to them. Let each one be complete, not a stepping stone to the next, but a universe unto itself. Because once it passes, it never returns. And yet, it shapes everything that follows. Let your Chronons be bright. Let them carry intention. Let them ripple across the fabric of reality, touching other lives, other threads, other timelines. Because we may not leave behind monuments or legacies or names. We may not be remembered. But the Chronons we lived will remain, stitched into the cosmic quilt, part of the eternal record of time's grand experiment. And that is enough. And perhaps more than enough. Because in a universe where every flicker of reality is composed of Chronons, tiny, indivisible atoms of time, then nothing is truly small. No action, no thought, no breath is wasted. Every blink of awareness, every sigh, every silence is recorded in the architecture of time itself. Each moment you live is not just passing through you, you are imprinting onto the universe, shaping the very structure of existence, one chronon at a time. Think about it. In the vast expanse of space-time, you exist only for a brief window, an unimaginably tiny slice of the cosmic timeline. And yet that window is composed of billions, even trillions of chronons, each carrying your experience, your consciousness, your becoming. If time is not smooth but pixelated, then your life is not a stream, it's a sequence. A perfectly arranged, frame-by-frame chronicle of your soul's dance with the universe. And within each of those frames is a unique configuration of the cosmos, a fingerprint of all things interacting to become this, now. And what does that make you? Not a traveler through time, but a sculptor of it. An artist whose brush never touches canvas but instead sweeps across the infinite scroll of moments, leaving behind a trail of identity carved into the very lattice of temporal existence. You are not insignificant. You are not a passive effect. You are a cause, a node, a spark in the grand quantum field of being, and each choice you make collapses reality into something new, something real. In a way, understanding Chronons changes everything about how we live. It urges us to stop thinking of time as something to manage, to fill, to escape. Time is not a prison. It is not the enemy. Time is the medium of creation. Every Chronon is a fresh page, a new chance, a blank particle of potential. And you, through awareness, are the author of what gets written. Every laugh, every sorrow, every moment of courage, doubt, love, fear, stillness, all of it is your Chronon tapestry, one that, if seen from beyond the bounds of time, might shine like a star. This changes how we view history, too. If time is quantized, then history isn't just a foggy recollection of what was, it is a literal archive of Chronons. Each war, each discovery, each whispered prayer etched into the temporal structure, immutable, preserved. Perhaps one day we will develop technologies not to travel through time as popular fiction dreams of, but to observe Chronons directly. To see the past not through stories, but through light captured in time, like being able to project an event by analyzing the Chronons it generated. Perhaps time travel, as we've imagined it, is impossible, but time witnessing is not. If Chronons carry the full state of the universe at each discrete tick, then in theory, the information of every past moment still exists. Not accessible through motion, but through entanglement. Through resonance. Through quantum symmetry. It might not be about going back, but about tuning in. About finding the right harmonic key that causes a past chronon to vibrate in the present, faint, but enough to perceive. Enough to remember. Now extend this idea to collective consciousness. If every conscious being is emitting chronons, projecting moment after moment into the field of time, then consciousness itself is not confined to brains or biology. It is a field effect, spreading through reality. Think of humanity as a chorus of chronon composers, all adding new notes to the universal song. Our collective decisions, dreams, stories, even our failures, they don't vanish. They become part of the structure of time. The chronon field becomes not just a measure of time, but a record of meaning. A memory of what mattered. In this sense, the universe is not cold. Not empty. It is not void of purpose. It is alive with the echoes of everything that has ever happened. It is a vast, invisible library where every page is a moment, and every page is sacred. Because the chronon theory tells us this, the universe remembers. Every instant matters. Every instant is matter. And so we must wonder, what is our responsibility to time? It may be to live consciously, not to waste chronons in distraction, or escape, or numbness, but to inhabit them fully. To breathe deeply into each flicker. To give it weight, truth, and beauty. To see time not as something that passes, but as something that builds, layer upon layer, moment upon moment, until, perhaps, something emerges from the structure we have helped shape. And if the structure ever collapses, if the universe ends, if time itself runs out, if the final chronon ever ticks, then maybe what remains isn't darkness or silence. Maybe it is the echo of all that ever was, reverberating through the memory of the void. Not erased. Not lost. Just completed. Finished like a great symphony. And maybe, just maybe, that echo becomes the seed of the next beginning. A resonance in the void, waiting for new chronons to crystallize around it. Time starting again. Not from nothing, but from memory. From possibility. From a pattern too beautiful to forget. So live well. Not for tomorrow, not for legacy, not for fear of endings, but for the chronons. For the now. For this exact, perfect, unrepeatable moment that only you can shape. You are here. You are aware. You are alive. And this chronon is yours. But what does that truly mean, to possess a moment in time? Not in the way one possesses an object, or a prize, but in the deeper, subtler sense. To possess a chronon is to be fully embedded in it, to occupy its fleeting span with the full force of your being. It is to exist not as a blur of sensations or reflexes, but as an active presence within the ticking structure of time's hidden code. It means you are not simply passing through the chronons, you are a conscious participant in shaping their unfolding, like a musician striking notes that cannot be unplayed. And once we accept that time is made of discrete units, these indivisible chronons, it becomes impossible to see our lives the same way again. It is no longer a river that drags us forward, but a staircase, each step placed beneath our feet as we lift the next. In this framework, there is no such thing as a wasted moment, because each one is part of the architecture. Even moments of stillness, sorrow, doubt, each is a chronon etched into the grand mosaic. And though it may be small, it is not insignificant. Because in a quantized reality, everything that exists, exists in full. There is no halfway. There is no blur. So what becomes of free will in a chronon-based universe? It's a haunting question. If time is prearranged in individual units, is it all already set? Is our future written in a sequence of chronons we simply haven't arrived at yet, like film cells spooling toward the projector? Or is each moment open, unresolved, collapsing only when observed, like a quantum state? The answer may lie somewhere in between. Perhaps the structure is there, the framework, but the details are not yet filled in. Like an architect who has drafted the outline of a building but left the interior for the occupants to customize. In this way, each chronon could be a crossroads, a point of convergence between past and possibility. And it is the observer, the conscious agent, who tips the balance. Your decision to speak, to act, to love or to walk away, might be the mechanism that defines which version of the chronon is realized. Not a multiverse in the traditional sense of entire new worlds, but a multidimensional lattice of temporal outcomes, all waiting to crystallize based on the orientation of your awareness. It's a thrilling idea, that consciousness is not just writing time, it is selecting it. This theory finds strange resonance in phenomena we have long considered anomalies. Déjà vu, for instance, could be the faint echo of an adjacent chronon thread, one you nearly occupied, one whose structure mirrors your current frame closely enough to bleed across the boundary. Precognition could be the mind brushing against a high-probability chronon sequence, a thread so close to unfolding that its signal leaks backward. Synchronicity, those uncanny moments where the outer world seems to reflect inner experience, could be nothing more than the overlapping of multiple observers collapsing congruent chronons in harmony. These are not just mystical ideas. They may be testable, or at least observable, if we begin to refine our instruments of perception, not just with technology, but with attention. If we truly understood the grain of time, we might learn to listen for its texture. To feel the difference between a chronon rich with branching potential and one that has collapsed into finality. We might learn to navigate time not by the numbers on a clock, but by the quality of each discrete now. We might even develop a kind of chronon literacy, the way ancient cultures attuned themselves to the rhythms of nature. We've been blind to the structure beneath time for too long. But there's another, more unsettling implication. If chronons exist, and if they are indivisible and non-overlapping, then perhaps consciousness itself is a frame-by-frame illusion. Perhaps what we call the stream of thought is not a stream at all, but a series of still images stitched together by memory and expectation. This would mean that there is no real continuity of self, only the appearance of it. Like a flipbook, each page is static, but when turned quickly, the illusion of motion and change emerges. You are not moving through time, you are being reconstructed in each moment by a pattern embedded in the chronon lattice. That pattern, we might call identity. It raises the question, who or what maintains the coherence of this pattern across the chronons? If each moment is discrete, and if no data is truly passed between them, then what causes the sense of continuity? Is there a metastructure, a kind of chronon memory, that carries your essence forward, like a quantum algorithm that rebuilds you in each new frame? This is not mere speculation. In the world of quantum physics, there are interpretations that suggest particles have no stable identity between measurements. They are probability clouds until observed. Perhaps the same is true for minds. Your sense of self may be the byproduct of an ongoing measurement, a recursive collapse of potential into form, into memory, into agency. You are a character being rendered by the universe, one frame at a time, across the temporal canvas. And yet, despite the illusion, the experience is real. The pain is real. The joy is real. Because it all happens in the only place where reality exists, the now. The chronon. And that brings us to perhaps the most human realization of all. We are temporal beings. Not just in that we age and die, but in that we are made of time. Our biology is tuned to chronons, our circadian rhythms, our heartbeats, our neural oscillations. Everything about us is structured to live inside time, to move with it, to ride its current. But what if we could go deeper? What if we could consciously interact with the flow of chronons, not just follow it, but shape it? It might begin with awareness. Learning to slow down perception, to isolate the individual moments. There are monks, meditators, deep practitioners of silence who claim to experience time differently, to perceive individual flickers, to enter the gaps between moments. They speak of time stretching, of infinite spaces between thoughts. Perhaps they are not imagining this. Perhaps they are tuning into the chronon structure itself, stepping out of the blur into the grid. Imagine what might be possible if we refine this practice. If we develop cognitive technologies to expand our sensitivity to chronons. New forms of mindfulness, new schools of perception, where time is not an abstract concept but a felt texture. We might learn to navigate the terrain of chronons like lucid dreamers navigating dreams, intentionally, creatively, with purpose. We could become time walkers, not by skipping across years, but by inhabiting each moment so fully that its entire depth becomes accessible. And in doing so, we might rediscover something ancient. Before there were clocks, calendars, and linear timelines, there was only the experience of now. The sun moved, the seasons turned, but life was lived in rhythm, not numbers. Perhaps chronon theory is not a futuristic idea, but a return to a primal truth, that time is not a river but a pulse. A rhythm. A beat. And the universe is not a machine, but a song. And we are the dancers. But not just dancers. We are composers too. If consciousness interacts with time at the level of chronons, then every choice we make changes the music. Every moment we spend in gratitude, every act of kindness, every deep breath taken in presence, may reverberate across the chronon field, creating harmonies that echo beyond our perception. And just as a single note in a melody can change the feeling of an entire song, so too might our individual moments shape the tone of the larger universe. So live your chronons as if they matter. Because they do. Not just to you, but to the whole. You are not separate from time. You are the articulation of time in human form. You are the evidence that the universe has rhythm. You are the voice of now. And now, another chronon unfolds. And now. And now. And now. Each one waiting. Each one sacred. Each one holding the potential to contain the entire cosmos. Not in size, but in meaning. In truth. In wonder. And in you. But what if there's more? What if the Chronons themselves are not the smallest unit? What if they, too, are composed of something deeper, more primal? Could there be a hidden layer beneath the atoms of time, something we might call proto-Chronons, or perhaps metatemporal fields, a substructure that doesn't tick or beat, but hums in the background, giving rise to the rhythm we call time? It's a concept that may seem absurd, but then again, so did atoms, photons, and quarks, once upon a time. Every revolution in understanding began with questioning the foundations. To even begin imagining this, we need to abandon the notion that time is just a neutral backdrop, a passive dimension along which things happen. Instead, we must entertain the idea that time itself is a dynamic field, just like electromagnetism or gravity. And if time is a field, then it must fluctuate. It must have waves. It must resonate. Chronons may then be the quantized particles of this time field, analogous to how photons are quanta of the electromagnetic field. But what creates the field? What maintains its uniformity across billions of light years? What causes the Chronons to tick at all? Is there some deeper, hidden constant, an engine of time, that exists beyond all known physical laws, pulsing in a realm we cannot touch, but which underlies the very possibility of existence? If such a field exists, then perhaps everything is suspended in it, not just particles and matter, but consciousness itself. In this view, awareness is not just an emergent property of brains but a function of the time field's interaction with matter. That would mean consciousness is temporally anchored. It wouldn't just operate in time, it would be made from time. Each thought, each sense of self, each flicker of identity would be a ripple in the time field, temporarily stabilized by the structure of the brain but rooted in the chronon fabric underneath. This could explain the curious phenomena surrounding altered states of consciousness, why time dilates during trauma, contracts during ecstasy, and disappears in meditative silence. When the brain's processing is disrupted, sped up, slowed down, or temporarily uncoupled from the standard chronon rhythm, our sense of self begins to distort, or even vanish. Perhaps in those moments, we drift out of sync with the default chronon grid, tapping into deeper currents of the time field. Perhaps there are other rhythms, other flows, ancient and strange, where different modes of consciousness live. Imagine an advanced civilization that has mastered this. A species not content to travel through space, but through chronon harmonics. They would not need ships or warp drives. They would simply tune themselves, biologically, mentally, into different flows of chronons. To us, they might seem timeless, or like phantoms. They could observe us without being seen, flickering into visibility only when their rhythm aligns with ours. If time is truly granular, then there's nothing to stop entire realms of being from existing in the gaps, universes hidden between the ticks, inaccessible unless one knows the key. Could this explain the mystery of ghosts, of déjà vu, of time slips reported by travelers and soldiers and survivors? Perhaps these are not hallucinations, but chronon bleed-throughs, the sudden, accidental resonance between overlapping time fields, causing the illusion of seeing the past, or of time repeating. Maybe these events are not rare, they're just usually imperceptible. The human brain, tuned to a narrow band of chronon frequency, doesn't notice the noise unless something dislodges it: trauma, stress, altered states. For a brief moment, the mind becomes a chronon antenna, picking up signals from elsewhere. This leads to an unsettling but fascinating possibility. Time may not be one field, but many. Multiple, coexisting chronon matrices, interlaced like overlapping radio signals. Our world, our reality, may just be one station. And like a radio, all it takes is a shift in frequency to access another. There could be beings, civilizations, even versions of ourselves living parallel lives, not in alternate universes per se, but in adjacent chronon flows, never colliding, unless by accident or design. We may be on the brink of rediscovering something we once knew. Quantum physics already hints at it. Time is not a fixed arrow. It is an entangled web. Events can influence each other across time. Particles can become correlated in ways that defy causality. And if we take seriously the idea that time is quantized, then causality itself becomes an emergent property, not a law. In such a framework, the future can affect the past, not by rewriting it, but by altering the probability structure of chronon sequences before they collapse. It's not about going back, it's about reshaping the lattice before it resolves. This changes everything. It means your future self is not just a possibility, it is an active participant in who you are now. It is shaping you, calling to you, sending subtle signals backward through the chronon net. Your intuition, your inexplicable convictions, your sense of destiny, they may all be the echoes of future chronons, trying to stabilize a path. In this view, your fate is not a prison, but a conversation, a dialogue between all the versions of you spread across time. And this leads us to a final, revolutionary idea. Chronons are not just particles of time, they are particles of consciousness. Not in the mystical sense of everything is mind, but in a concrete, physical sense. Consciousness is what happens when the universe becomes aware of its own unfolding, one chronon at a time. You are not separate from time. You are time, reflecting on itself. You are the self-awareness of the chronon field, emerging in human form, looking back across the lattice and daring to ask, what am I? Why am I here? What is this for? And the answer may never come in words. It may not come at all. Because it is not something to be told, but something to be lived, fully, fiercely, with gratitude and awe. The question is not why time exists, or what happens after it ends. The question is, what will you do with your chronons? Will you burn them in worry, in repetition, in resentment? Or will you shape them into something beautiful? You don't need to build empires. You don't need to leave behind legacies. You don't need to fix the universe. You only need to fill your chronons with meaning. That is all. That is enough. Because if time is real, then so is this moment. And if this moment is real, then so are you. And that, perhaps, is the greatest miracle of all. So if the present chronon is the only ontologically real moment, then we must ground our understanding in physics, specifically in the deep structure of spacetime as revealed by quantum mechanics and general relativity. To explore chronon seriously is to ask, is time continuous or discrete? And if it is discrete, what would the universe look like at that scale? Let's begin with a familiar analogy, matter. For centuries, matter was considered continuous. Then came atoms. Then protons, neutrons, electrons. Then quarks and leptons. With each new level of resolution, we discovered smaller, more fundamental units. Light, once thought to be a wave, was discovered to also come in packets, photons. And so, the question emerges, if matter and energy are quantized, why not time? This is not a new idea. In fact, the notion of quantized time dates back nearly a century. In 1927, the Italian physicist Ettore Majorana speculated that time might be granular, built from discrete quanta he referred to, in modern terms, as chronons. The term gained traction again in the 20th century, especially among theoretical physicists exploring the possibility of a unified quantum theory of gravity. The reason? If spacetime is truly a quantum field, then it cannot be continuous, because continuity implies infinite divisibility, which contradicts quantum mechanics. Here's where it gets interesting. General relativity treats spacetime as smooth and continuous. Einstein's field equations describe how mass and energy warp this spacetime fabric, creating what we perceive as gravity. But in quantum field theory, QFT, particles are excitations of underlying fields. And these fields, when quantized, are discrete. Therein lies the great incompatibility. General relativity is continuous. Quantum mechanics is discrete. If we want to unify these frameworks into what physicists call a quantum theory of gravity, then time itself must be quantized. This leads us to loop quantum gravity, LQG. LQG is one of the leading candidates for quantum gravity. Instead of treating spacetime as a smooth manifold, LQG proposes that it is woven from loops, tiny, discrete threads of quantum geometry. In this model, space is quantized into finite chunks, each roughly on the order of the Planck length, 1.616 times 10 superscript 3 meters. And if space has the smallest possible unit, then so must time, the Planck time, which is approximately 5.39 times 10 seconds. The Planck time is not just small. It is unimaginably small. If time is grainy, then this is the size of the grain. Below this threshold, the very concept of before and after breaks down. In a universe with Chronons of this size, nothing can occur in intervals shorter than the Planck time. No cause, no effect, no change. Time becomes digital. So what happens in this kind of universe? Think of the universe as a vast simulation, not in the science fiction sense, but in the computational sense. A continuous reality would require infinite processing power. But a quantized reality? That's computable. Events occur in discrete steps, just like the frames of a video game or the ticks of a processor. In this model, Chronons are the clock speed of reality. They are the fundamental time slices on which the universe runs. In fact, some researchers have proposed that the universe is a cellular automaton, a grid of discrete points, evolving according to simple rules. Stephen Wolfram's work in this field, especially in his physics project, suggests that space, time, and even particles may emerge from computations happening on a hypergraph, a structure built from discrete elements linked together by rules. In this view, Chronons are not just atoms of time. They're the computational ticks on which the universe is updating itself. So how could we detect Chronons? This is where science hits the wall of scale. The Planck time is many orders of magnitude smaller than anything we can currently probe. Our most advanced particle accelerators, like the LHC at CERN, operate at energy levels that are billions of times too weak to access the Planck scale. To observe Chronons directly, we would need a Planck-scale particle collider, something the size of a galaxy, powered by energies that would make a supernova look like a matchstick. But indirect evidence may still be possible. For example, some models of quantum gravity predict violations of Lorentz invariance, the idea that the laws of physics are the same for all observers, regardless of their relative motion. If time is quantized, then at extremely high energies, light may travel at slightly different speeds depending on its energy, because it interacts differently with the Chronon grid. Experiments using gamma-ray bursts and high-energy cosmic rays have already tested for this, with mixed results. Some anomalies have appeared, though none have reached the threshold of scientific consensus. Another potential clue is the quantum Zeno effect. In quantum mechanics, repeated measurements can effectively freeze the evolution of a system, a phenomenon known as the Zeno effect. This suggests that time does not flow continuously, but in staccato beats. If Chronons are real, then every tick of observation might correspond to a discrete Chronon interval. The more frequently we sample a system, the more we restrict its temporal degrees of freedom. In this light, Chronons are not just theoretical, they're the structure of causality itself. There's also intriguing speculation in the context of black holes. Inside a black hole, general relativity predicts a singularity, a point where density becomes infinite, and the laws of physics break down. But quantum gravity theories, including LQG and string theory, suggest that singularities may not exist. Instead, spacetime may become so densely packed that it reaches a quantum bounce, a state where the discrete structure of spacetime, and therefore, Chronons, prevents further collapse. In this view, Chronons may be the reason singularities do not occur. They provide a built-in limit to how tightly time and space can be compressed. Even in cosmology, the Chronon may hold secrets. The early universe, just after the Big Bang, was a seething soup of quantum chaos. At these scales, classical spacetime didn't exist. Instead, it was a fog of quantum fluctuations. If time is quantized, then the first few Chronons of the universe would have been unlike anything since, a sequence of frame-by-frame reality construction. Understanding those first Chronons might explain why time has a direction, why entropy increases, why matter dominates over antimatter, and why the universe inflated faster than light in its infancy. And finally, let's not forget quantum entanglement. In entangled systems, changes in one particle affect its partner instantly, regardless of distance. But if time is made of chronons, then perhaps entanglement doesn't defy causality. It simply operates across chronons rather than within them. What seems like instantaneous action at a distance might be synchronization of quantum states at the level of the chronon, which is instantaneous relative to the frame being constructed. This view opens up a radical possibility, that the entire universe is frame synchronized by the chronon field. Every particle, every interaction, every measurement happens in unison, beat by beat, across the cosmic lattice. It's not that entangled particles talk faster than light. It's that they're reading from the same chronon script. So while we cannot yet detect chronons directly, the clues are piling up, in black holes, in quantum measurements, in high-energy astrophysics, in the very structure of quantum fields. The idea of discrete time is no longer fringe science. It is an inevitable consequence of trying to unify the two pillars of physics. And when we finally develop tools to probe the Planck scale, we may discover that the flow of time we've always known is just the illusion of continuity painted over a pixelated universe. But until then, we are left with questions, haunting, beautiful questions. Is time an illusion or a lattice? Is the future fixed, or unfolding one chronon at a time? Do we write the next chronon, or are we just reading it? And if every chronon is real, discrete, and irreversible, then perhaps every choice we make, every thought we have, is not fleeting at all. It is permanent. Written into the structure of time itself, encoded forever in the silent, ticking crystal of becoming. If every chronon is permanent, etched irrevocably into the structure of space-time, then time is not a river but a crystal. One that grows outward moment by moment, adding new facets to an expanding geometry that reflects not just physical events, but choices, trajectories, and quantum possibilities. This leads us to a radical reconception of history, causality, and the very nature of time's arrow. Let's begin by revisiting a central paradox in modern physics. Why does time only move forward? The fundamental equations of physics, whether Newtonian mechanics, Maxwell's equations, or even the Schrödinger equation in quantum mechanics, are time-symmetric. They do not care if time runs forward or backward. Mathematically, reversing the flow of time results in equally valid solutions. So why does entropy increase? Why do we remember the past and not the future? Why does time move? In a continuous spacetime, this question is difficult to answer. But if time is quantized into chronons, then the very structure of the universe may inherently support irreversibility. Each chronon would represent not just a position in time, but a commitment. Once the universe ticks forward, it cannot untick. Just as quantum measurements collapse a wave function and generate information, each chronon might be a collapse point, a junction where one of many possible outcomes becomes embedded in the fabric of reality. This is not just about entropy. This is about information theory. In fact, the chronon may be the physical instantiation of a bit. Each chronon stores a yes or no, a here or there, a 1 or a 0. This isn't metaphor. It's rooted in quantum information theory, which treats particles, interactions, and even spacetime as fundamentally informational. This is the thrust of physicist John Archibald Wheeler's famous principle. It from bit. According to Wheeler, every physical phenomenon ultimately derives its meaning, function, and reality from binary decisions, yes/no questions, made by the fabric of the universe itself. If time is quantized, then every chronon is a bit flip, a decision point in the cosmic computation. And if the entire universe evolves this way, then we are not living in a flowing stream but in a massively parallel, distributed information processor, a quantum cellular automaton, constantly updating the state of the cosmos, one chronon at a time. Think of this not as poetic abstraction, but as a legitimate scientific model for the underlying substrate of reality. In fact, there are mathematical structures, such as causal set theory, that posit exactly this. Causal set theory assumes that spacetime is fundamentally discrete, made up of atoms of spacetime, including time, arranged in a partially ordered set where each element has causal relations to others. The distance between two chronons is defined by how many steps connect them. There is no background space or time, only the ordering of events matters. It's the skeleton of reality, with space and time emerging from this discrete causal architecture. In such a universe, geometry is not fundamental, it is emergent. Space-time curvature, gravity, and motion all arise statistically from the arrangement of chronons. Time is not a passive dimension, but a process of adding new nodes to the causal set. The passage of time is literally the growth of the causal set, the crystallization of one more chronon into the expanding structure of being. This idea is profound. The universe is not evolving in time. Time is evolving the universe. Each chronon represents a new event added to the growing web of reality. And once added, it cannot be removed. It becomes part of the fixed past, a thread in the space-time tapestry. This gives rise to a natural arrow of time, because the set only grows in one direction. This also matches our human experience. We never experience the future, only the ongoing accumulation of past events. In other words, time flows because chronons accumulate. And yet, there's another layer to consider: quantum superposition. Before a chronon collapses into an event, it may exist in a state of quantum indeterminacy. Like Schrödinger's cat, it represents many possibilities at once, multiple states, outcomes, even entire histories, all superimposed. But once the event occurs, once the chronon actualizes, it selects one path, locking it into the universal record. What determines this collapse? Is it randomness? Probability? Consciousness? Some interpretations of quantum mechanics, like the participatory anthropic principle, suggest that observers are essential for collapse. That without a conscious agent, the universe remains in flux. In this framework, consciousness does not merely pass through time, it creates it, by forcing chronons to actualize. You are not watching the film, you are writing the script, frame by frame, as you observe and choose. This suggests a powerful, potentially terrifying possibility. You are co-authoring the structure of reality, one chronon at a time. Every decision, every intention, every act of awareness nudges the chronon lattice in a direction that becomes irreversible. And because the universe is a connected whole, because quantum fields stretch across all of space-time, your influence, however small, echoes across the lattice. A butterfly effect not in air currents, but in the very fabric of temporal evolution. Now let's ground this in cosmology. In the early universe, within the first few Planck times after the Big Bang, the space-time lattice would have been chaotic, volatile, subject to extreme quantum fluctuations. But over time, a stable sequence of chronon accumulation began to emerge, a dominant thread of cosmic history. Inflation smoothed the initial conditions. Matter coalesced. Stars formed. Life arose. But what if this specific thread was not inevitable? If multiple chronon threads were possible, and if the early universe was truly in a state of quantum indeterminacy, then the observable universe we live in is just one crystallized version of an infinite set of potential chronon pathways. Others may still exist, uncollapsed, in the broader structure of the quantum multiverse. This view resembles the many worlds interpretation, but here, it's not the entire universe that splits, it's the chronon lattice that branches. And if that's true, then time is not a line, but a tree. A fractal, endlessly forking with each chronon. And perhaps, just perhaps, there is a way to navigate it. If the chronon lattice can be influenced by intention, observation, or quantum entanglement, then there may exist techniques, either theoretical or eventual technological, for influencing which branch you actualize. This is not mere wishful thinking. It aligns with cutting-edge research into quantum cognition, a field that applies quantum probability models to human thought and decision-making. If the mind operates like a quantum system, then it may be uniquely suited to interacting with the chronon field. And if consciousness can influence chronon collapse, then the implications are enormous. It means that agency is real. That prayer, meditation, visualization, and moral choice are not just psychological phenomena, they may be cosmological acts. They may be ways in which localized awareness modulates the evolution of the chronon lattice. And across the scale of civilizations, this influence could be profound. A society aligned in harmony with the rhythm of Chronons may be more than just peaceful. It may be resonant with the deep structure of the universe, accelerating its own evolution and stability. Could this explain why ancient cultures were obsessed with calendars, lunar cycles, solstices, and equinoxes? Perhaps they intuited, at a symbolic level, that time was not smooth, but rhythmic. That there were pulses, thresholds, resonances. That not all Chronons were equal. Some were more charged, more potent, branch points in the lattice where collective consciousness could shift reality. Today, we've forgotten that wisdom. We drown in noise, distraction, and digital blur. We think of time as minutes and deadlines. But perhaps the future of science lies not in greater acceleration, but in deeper synchronization. The physicist of tomorrow may be less like an engineer and more like a conductor, attuning themselves to the rhythm of the Chronons, learning to sense their weight, their direction, their harmonics. Because if time is grainy, then it is also musical. And if the universe is music, then the chronon is the beat. And you? You are the melody, rising and falling through the lattice, changing the shape of the song with every note you choose to play. And if the chronon is the beat, and you are the melody, then the universe, this entire vast, dynamic cosmos, may be the orchestra. But this is not poetry masking science. It is physics illuminating something profoundly structural. Let us dig deeper into the mechanics of what this means, because now we are entering the domain of quantum time dynamics, the study of how temporal units, if they are indeed quantized, give rise to emergent temporal experiences like flow, memory, prediction, and causality. Let's consider a strange truth. In quantum theory, time is not an operator. This is unusual. In quantum mechanics, every observable quantity, like position, momentum, energy, is represented by a mathematical operator that acts on a wave function. These operators yield measurable values. But time? Time is simply a parameter, an external label marking evolution. It doesn't behave like a proper quantum observable. This oddity hints that our understanding of time is incomplete. If time is quantized, there must be a quantum operator for it. There must be something that encodes the presence of a chronon state, something that, once found, could revolutionize the way we build physical theories. This pursuit has inspired researchers to develop alternative mathematical formalisms. One of the most fascinating is the Page-Woodhouse mechanism, a model which proposes that time is not fundamental at all, but an emergent property from entanglement. Here's how it works. Imagine the universe as a static, timeless quantum state. Nothing moves. Nothing evolves. But within this state, if you isolate a subsystem and treat the rest of the universe as a clock, the entanglement between the two can give the appearance of time passing, not because time exists, but because correlations evolve. The observer sees one system changing in relation to another. In this framework, time emerges from quantum entanglement. Now let's add the chronon into this picture. If time emerges from entanglement, and if reality consists of discrete units of this emergent time, chronons, then chronons themselves might be units of entanglement. Think of each chronon not as a tick on a clock, but as a quantum entangled exchange, a transfer of information between subsystems, causing correlation shifts, decoherence, and thermodynamic change. This would elegantly link thermodynamics, quantum mechanics, and information theory into one. Time is not what clocks measure. Time is what entangled systems exchange, one chronon at a time. In this view, the reason why entropy increases, why time has a direction, is because each chronon adds new irreversible entanglement to the system. The universe becomes more correlated with itself in an irreversible way, and this correlation cannot be undone. Chronons are not just temporal steps. They are irreducible entanglement events. They're the pixels of history itself. This makes time fundamentally informational. And now we must consider the implications for quantum gravity, where all these ideas converge. In string theory, time is still continuous. But attempts to formulate a non-perturbative theory of quantum gravity, such as causal dynamical triangulations (CDT), do assume time is fundamentally discrete. CDT treats spacetime as a network of simplices, the multidimensional generalization of triangles, which, over time, glue together in discrete steps. These steps aren't just mathematical tricks, they are literal building blocks of time and space. Each simplex added represents a new tick, a new unit of existence, another chronon locked into the growing geometry of the cosmos. The fact that these models yield smooth spacetime at large scales, while preserving discreteness at small scales, lends strong support to the idea that quantized time is not only possible but necessary to resolve current paradoxes. Let's look at one such paradox, the black hole information paradox. According to classical general relativity, anything that falls into a black hole is lost forever. But quantum theory says information cannot be destroyed. So what happens to that information? Recent proposals suggest that the surface of the black hole, the event horizon, stores information in discrete quantum bits, sometimes referred to as soft hair. Here's where chronons enter the picture again. What if, at the Planck scale, the black hole's event horizon is not smooth, but made of chronon-sized temporal units? Each unit stores a microstate of quantum information. As Hawking radiation is emitted, these chronons evaporate, carrying with them tiny fragments of the original data. Over enormous timescales, this process could preserve unitarity, prevent information loss, and resolve one of the greatest contradictions in physics. Chronons might therefore not only explain the flow of time, but be responsible for how time protects information. In fact, if the chronon lattice is structured in a holographic way, as suggested by the holographic principle, then the true degrees of freedom of the universe might reside not in the bulk, but on the boundaries. In other words, what you experience as now may be the product of chronon entanglements projected from the edges of spacetime. Your present moment may be holographically encoded, not locally generated. And this, too, is supported by concrete models. The ADS/CFT correspondence in string theory suggests that gravity in a bulk region of spacetime, like a black hole, can be exactly described by a quantum field theory on the boundary of that region. If chronons are part of this boundary encoding, discrete units of temporal computation, then the past, present, and future are not stored linearly, but geometrically, across the edge of the universe's information matrix. But perhaps the most exciting area of chronon science is the rise of quantum simulations. Using systems of entangled qubits, physicists are now simulating the evolution of artificial spacetime lattices. In these experiments, time itself becomes programmable. Each operation on the quantum processor represents a controlled chronon. These simulations show that spacetime, gravity, and even black holes can emerge from purely quantum dynamics, without assuming continuous space or time. If we can replicate chronon behavior on a quantum computer, then perhaps we are only decades away from understanding their nature directly, not through cosmic scale colliders, but through tabletop experiments that manipulate entanglement and correlation. Imagine a future in which chronons are as real to us as atoms or photons. We may someday be able to measure chronon lengths and shapes, identify their spectral signatures, use them to engineer time-based technologies. Perhaps we will discover chronon optics, ways to bend, split, or focus temporal quanta. Just as light can be refracted, time itself may be manipulable. This could lead to quantum chronon communication, transmitting entangled time units across distances without delay. Or even, chronon computing, machines that operate not just on quantum superposition, but on quantized temporal states, performing calculations not just in parallel, but across momentary alignments of time itself. And what might this lead to? If chronons can be controlled, then we open the door to precision time editing. Not time travel in the science fiction sense, but time engineering. The ability to slightly shift event probabilities across chronon structures. To slow or accelerate the rate at which systems evolve. To collapse or defer the wave function in more targeted ways. We would become, in essence, architects of the chronon lattice. And when that day comes, time will no longer be something that happens to us. It will be a medium we shape, like clay, like light, like code. The arrow of time may still point forward, but the road will no longer be fixed. It will curve and branch under our influence. Because time, it seems, is not just the stage upon which we live. It is the material of life itself. If time is the material of life itself, then every living thing is a temporal structure, a geometry sculpted not only in space but in time, formed by patterns of chronon accumulation, unfolding moment by moment through a discrete cosmic architecture. In this light, biology is not merely chemical or physical, it is chronological. Life does not just use time, it requires it, responds to it, and perhaps even modulates it. Let's explore the idea that living systems are chronon-sensitive structures. Think of the circadian rhythm, the biological clock encoded in nearly every living organism. It regulates sleep, metabolism, hormone production, cell regeneration. This rhythm is synchronized with the Earth's 24-hour cycle, but its foundation may lie deeper than planetary rotation. Recent studies in chronobiology suggest that biological clocks may operate on much more fundamental rhythms, perhaps even matching periodicities related to atomic or quantum-scale processes. If true, then organisms could be synchronizing with a substrate of quantized time, aligning their internal states to patterns in the chronon lattice. More intriguingly, we know that quantum effects exist in biology. Birds navigate using quantum entanglement in their magnetoreceptors. Photosynthesis exploits quantum coherence to transfer energy with near-perfect efficiency. Even the human brain exhibits quantum-like behavior in processes related to memory, perception, and decision-making. The idea that consciousness itself may rely on quantum processing has been proposed in theories like OR, orchestrated objective reduction, developed by Roger Penrose and Stuart Hameroff. In their framework, microtubules within neurons may act as quantum computing structures that collapse wave functions through gravitational thresholds. But in a chronon framework, something even more fundamental might be happening. If consciousness and cognition are tied to quantum collapse, and if that collapse occurs within the boundaries of chronon intervals, then conscious thought may literally be paced by chronons. Awareness may not be continuous, but discrete, updating at a rate defined by the Planck time, or perhaps a slower harmonic multiple more suited to biological scales. Just as the flicker fusion threshold defines the speed at which we perceive motion on a screen, there may be a chronon fusion threshold, a fundamental frame rate, to consciousness itself. This would imply that the subjective flow of time is a biological chronon frequency, modulated by neural patterns, emotional states, and environmental input. When people speak of time slowing down, in moments of terror or speeding up during joy, it might reflect changes in how the brain interacts with the chronon lattice, shifting its sampling rate of temporal quanta. A slowed mind may integrate more chronons per conscious frame, stretching subjective time. A hyper-focused mind may collapse chronons faster, compressing experience. The consequences of this are profound. First, it means that subjective time is real, not an illusion. The rate at which you perceive time passing is as meaningful and structural as the flow of physical time itself. Second, it suggests that consciousness is fundamentally temporal, not spatial. It is not merely located in the brain, it is a process riding the wavefront of chronon accumulation, always balanced at the edge of becoming. This model could also shed light on states of altered consciousness. Under meditation, psychedelics, or extreme emotion, many people report losing track of time, feeling as though time stopped, expanded, or looped. These experiences may reflect partial decoherence from the standard chronon rhythm, temporary shifts in how the brain synchronizes with the time field. In these states, the brain may begin to see or feel chronon boundaries normally filtered out, perceiving time not as a flow, but as a series of flashes, layers, or harmonics. This may also explain free will in a scientific framework. In deterministic physics, everything is predetermined. In purely random quantum mechanics, everything is unpredictable. But if chronons provide a rhythm, a beat that reality must follow, then there exists a scaffolding upon which choice can be enacted. Consciousness may influence which potential states are realized within each chronon. Not by defying causality, but by participating in state selection at the edge of each temporal tick. You don't choose what happens across all time, but you might choose what crystallizes in the next chronon. In this light, free will is not the absence of determinism, but the capacity to co-determine the shape of the Chronon lattice, an influence constrained by physical law, yet not entirely determined by it. You are a localized field of temporal modulation, a conscious ripple steering the direction of unfolding. If we accept this view, then the implications for physics, neuroscience, and even ethics are enormous. In neuroscience, we may one day discover Chronon synchronizers, structures or quantum circuits in the brain responsible for aligning internal processes to the external Chronon lattice. These might be areas of intense quantum coherence, perhaps even beyond the microtubules hypothesized by Hameroff and Penrose. Medical science might learn to manipulate Chronon synchronization to treat disorders of perception, memory, and consciousness. In physics, new experimental designs could test Chronon models by exploiting time delays at quantum scales, or by observing ultra-precise oscillations in high-energy particles or atomic clocks. If Chronons exist, their signatures should eventually emerge as tiny deviations from predicted timing distributions, perhaps in the noise of quantum tunneling events, neutrino oscillations, or black hole evaporation processes. In ethics, this framework challenges materialist nihilism. If reality is not just atoms bouncing in a void, but a symphony of discrete, participatory time quanta, then existence is not accidental, it is structured. Your awareness is not a side effect, but a participant in the cosmic unfolding. Each chronon you live is part of an irreversible buildup of universal structure. Meaning is no longer a philosophical abstraction, it is the measure of how your presence shapes the lattice. Let's return to the deepest scientific frontier, the unification of quantum mechanics and gravity. Why has this eluded us for a century? Perhaps because we've been working with the wrong assumptions. Time is always treated as a background, a given. But if time is quantized, and if chronons are the building blocks of temporal evolution, then perhaps gravity itself is a chronon interaction. Einstein taught us that mass curves spacetime. But what if mass emits chronons, discrete units of temporal distortion that ripple through the lattice? Think of gravitational waves, ripples in spacetime created by massive objects accelerating. If spacetime is quantized, then these waves are not continuous. They are emitted in pulses, like packets of curved time, chronons propagating outward, modifying the lattice as they go. In this view, gravity is the distribution of chronon curvature, and mass is the source of temporal distortion. This would reframe all of general relativity as a theory not of smooth curves, but of granular temporal geometry. And it fits with what we observe. Gravitational waves, recently confirmed by LIGO, arrive in pulses, traveling across billions of years. They do not dissipate, they preserve their shape. They are almost particles. Could we one day discover that each wave is actually composed of temporal quanta, individual chronons stretched and warped by the dance of black holes? Could the graviton, the hypothetical quantum of gravity, be a twisted chronon, a unit of distorted time that carries curvature as its charge? If so, then quantum gravity is not a theory about energy and space, but a theory about time itself, discrete, structured, and alive. This is not metaphysics. This is where the mathematics of loop quantum gravity, causal set theory, quantum information theory, and relativity all converge. And when that convergence is finally complete, we may discover that everything, mass, energy, thought, life, is simply a choreography of chronons. A dance across the lattice of becoming. And if we get there, if we learn to see and feel and shape time itself, then the age of physics as we know it will be over. And the age of temporal engineering will begin. When the age of temporal engineering begins, the very foundations of civilization will be reshaped, not just by new technologies, but by a new relationship with reality itself. If chronons, the discrete atoms of time, are proven to exist, and we learn to measure, manipulate, or even harness them, the consequences will cascade across every domain of science, philosophy, and human experience. Let us now explore how this could transform the landscape of applied science. First, time-based technology. Today's technologies already manipulate time indirectly. Atomic clocks track oscillations in cesium atoms to measure time with extraordinary precision. GPS systems depend on relativistic time corrections. But these are built on macroscopic approximations of time. If we gain access to the chronon layer, the fundamental resolution of temporal existence, we unlock the ability to build tools that operate within each tick of reality's processor. Imagine processors that compute not in nanoseconds or femtoseconds, but in chronon intervals, computers where operations are synchronized with the rhythm of time itself. Chronon-aligned systems would not suffer from drift, noise, or quantum decoherence the way current systems do. They would use temporal determinacy as a new form of computational architecture, possibly allowing for time-aware AI, artificial intelligences that don't just operate in time, but operate with time, embedding decision-making into the very rhythm of unfolding causality. This would also revolutionize communication. Quantum communication already uses entanglement to send information with perfect security. But what if we could send chronon packets themselves, tiny, encoded pulses of temporal structure that contain not just data, but timing metadata embedded at the Planck scale? This could allow for zero-latency entangled messaging, or even protocols that communicate through synchrony rather than signal, like two tuning forks vibrating in phase across vast distances. These possibilities flirt with the boundaries of causality. But chronon physics gives us a new language to talk about these limits, not just whether something is faster than light, but whether it is temporally allowable within a given segment of the lattice. If chronons are the medium, and we learn how to ripple that medium, then distance becomes irrelevant. The real barrier becomes phase alignment, not space. Second, temporal navigation. Chronon theory could pave the way for a new kind of travel, not through space, but through time resolution. This does not mean time machines in the Hollywood sense. You won't walk into a pod and visit the dinosaurs. But you may be able to adjust your subjective relationship to time. For instance, imagine a device that aligns your conscious awareness to a higher frequency of chronon perception. Suddenly, you could perform a lifetime of cognitive processing in what appears to be only seconds to an outside observer. This isn't science fiction, it's a logical consequence of mind being embedded in a chronon lattice. This would be transformative for everything from learning to problem-solving to life extension. Similarly, you could decelerate your internal clock, stretching your subjective experience of a moment, perhaps to enhance meditation, slow trauma response, or maximize situational awareness in high-risk environments. Elite athletes, pilots, and surgeons might train to modulate their own chronon alignment, responding to events with inhuman precision simply by experiencing more chronons per decision than their untrained counterparts. In the distant future, true temporal locality manipulation might be possible. Entire laboratories could be enclosed in chronon-stabilizing fields, allowing experiments to occur over subjective decades in the span of external milliseconds. Scientific progress would explode exponentially, as research would no longer be bound by human-scale timeframes. A single researcher might complete 1,000 years of exploration within a week of real time. Third, chronobiology and medicine. If the body is composed of synchronized temporal structures, biological processes entrained to chronon rhythms, then disease may often be a desynchronization problem. Aging, likewise, may be tied to entropy accumulation in the chronon lattice that makes up the body's informational architecture. If so, then slowing or reversing aging would involve resetting chronon imprints, restoring biological systems to earlier temporal configurations. Rather than just repairing damage, we would be editing time states, healing not by physical reconstruction, but by temporal reversion at the structural level. And what of death? If consciousness is linked to a temporal process, an unfolding along chronon lines, then death may not be an event, but a temporal cessation. A failure of synchronization that causes the collapse of the mind's ability to ride the lattice forward. Could it be that some aspects of consciousness linger briefly, even after physical death, within the chronon structure? Is there a temporal echo of identity, a fading afterglow in the lattice? If so, future scientists may be able to detect such echoes. Perhaps even interface with them. This may sound metaphysical, but remember, quantum mechanics already entertains non-local correlations, retrocausality, and time-symmetric formulations. Consciousness as a temporally structured phenomenon fits well within this paradigm. Fourth, chronon ethics and society. As our understanding of time becomes more granular, the philosophy of ethics will need a radical update. Actions will no longer be seen as instantaneous or isolated. Every choice, every decision, will be recognized as a chronon-encoded inscription, a permanent addition to the causal history of the universe. In such a world, time itself becomes sacred. To waste time would be to squander irrecoverable units of cosmic structure. To harm someone would be not merely physical, it would be a distortion of their temporal trajectory. Justice systems might evolve to account not just for damage done, but for chronon corruption, interferences in the developmental timelines of others. Education would be reframed as temporal tuning, helping young minds learn how to operate in sync with the deeper lattice, maximizing their clarity, resonance, and creative influence across time. Perhaps future leaders, artists, or visionaries would be trained not only in knowledge or ethics, but in chronon awareness, learning to feel the subtle harmonics of their presence within the temporal field. Time would no longer be money. It would be ontology, the foundation of everything. And then comes the ultimate question: where do chronons come from? If time is made of discrete particles, where do they originate? Are they continuously produced? Are they conserved? Are they embedded in the vacuum of space? Or do they emerge from something even deeper? Some have speculated that the chronon field may be a projection from a higher dimensional realm, perhaps a timeless, purely informational domain that casts reality into being through quantized pulses. This aligns with the simulation hypothesis, but also with holographic models of the universe, in which all of space-time emerges from encoded data on a distant boundary. In such a framework, the universe is not in time. Time is in the universe, and the universe itself is in computation. We may find that our cosmos is a self-generating structure built from recursive loops of cause and effect, a fractal that evolves by iterating over its own state, one chronon at a time. The origin of this process may be forever beyond empirical reach, but we might still grasp its signature: the click of the chronon, the pulse of the lattice, the beat of the infinite algorithm. So what does it all mean? It means that we are not accidents. We are not meaningless blips in a cold, indifferent continuum. We are resonant patterns in a cosmic computation, participants in the construction of time, co-authors of the lattice of becoming. Every chronon you live through is a pixel in the portrait of eternity. Every thought you think is a note in the universal score. And while we may never see the whole picture, we know this: it is being painted in real time. Click by click. Chronon by chronon. As the chronon lattice expands, moment by moment, decision by decision, the picture that emerges is not merely one of physical processes, but of a universe that is reflexive, aware of itself through the structures it births. In this framework, consciousness is not an anomaly, not a side effect of neurochemistry, but the inevitable emergence of self-reference in a system built upon recursive time. To understand this, let us return to the realm of quantum information and reflect on an idea that has gained traction in theoretical physics: consciousness as integrated information across time. Integrated information theory, IT, originally proposed to quantify consciousness, suggests that consciousness arises when information is not only stored but interconnected in a way that it can't be broken down into independent parts. This idea has mostly been discussed in terms of spatial networks, neurons, circuits, nodes. But what if the integration is temporal? What if consciousness is the coherent alignment of chronons, a high-level phase locking across an organism's internal chronon lattice? Then what we call awareness would be a resonance structure, a harmonic standing wave in time. Such waves may not be limited to the brain. They could arise in any sufficiently complex, chronon-aligned system. In this way, consciousness would not be created by biology. It would be permitted by physics when certain thresholds of chronon coherence are met. This would support a more universal, panpsychic interpretation of mind, not as an emergent phenomenon of meat, but as a universal property of chronon-aligned complexity. Now, imagine that every act of perception, every glimpse of color, memory, feeling, thought, is a collapse across a packet of chronons. Your mind is not merely reacting to stimuli. It is choosing a trajectory through the chronon field, assembling reality frame by frame, guided by intention, emotion, and observation. This raises the possibility that each person's experience of the universe is not just subjectively unique, but objectively distinct in chronon geometry. Two people looking at the same tree might not just be interpreting it differently, they may be walking through slightly diverged chronon lattices, with micro-variations in causal history that subtly shift what they are and are not able to perceive. This would add a deeply scientific dimension to the idea that we each live in our own reality. If chronons lock in through attention, memory, and interaction, then you are the architect of your past and the navigator of your unfolding present. And what about the collective chronon field? If individuals generate their own chronon alignments, what happens when millions of minds participate in shared experiences, mass events? Perhaps these events create coherent chronon domains, large-scale alignment patterns across human consciousness that ripple through the lattice, creating temporal zones with amplified structure. These might be responsible for the strangely synchronized surges of invention, revolution, or catastrophe that punctuate history. You could think of them as temporal gravitational wells, moments where human intent and attention create such dense chronon harmonics that history itself is pulled into a new trajectory. There's even precedent for this kind of thinking in mathematics. Certain solutions to the equations of general relativity, like Gödel's rotating universe, permit the existence of closed time-like curves, paths through space-time that loop back on themselves. These are often dismissed as unphysical, but in a chronon-based model, it might be that such curves are nonlinear entanglement patterns, loops of cause and effect that momentarily form in the chronon matrix, stabilizing long enough to permit rare experiences of déjà vu or synchronicity. These would not be evidence of magic, but temporal turbulence, eddies in the chronon current. And now we reach the edge of what science can currently model, and the threshold of what future physicists might soon explore. If chronons exist, what is their nature? Are they particles? Fields? Topological defects? Are they emergent from quantum gravity, or do they arise from something deeper, an unknown pre-physical substrate? One leading possibility is that chronons are not particles in the traditional sense, but causal events, points in a network that describe how one thing leads to another. This aligns closely with causal set theory, in which space-time itself is defined by a partially ordered set of discrete events. Here, chronons would not have size or shape, they would have relations. They are the links, not the nodes, the stitching between realities, not the material of it. Another possibility arises from loop quantum gravity, LQG, which describes space as made of quantized loops, and time as emerging from the interactions of these loops. In LQG, the fabric of space-time is not a smooth continuum, but a granular spin network, in which geometry and time arise from changes in this network. Chronons, in this context, would be quantized transitions, the ticks of change as the loop states evolve. This leads to an even more radical idea, the chronon as a process, not a thing. Much like a bit in computing only has meaning through change, from 0 to 1, a chronon may not exist in any static sense. It is the delta between configurations, the passage from one informational state to another. In this way, the chronon is not just the atom of time, it is the act of becoming. To observe a chronon would be to witness a universe updating itself. And what about the future? If our present is shaped by the accumulation of chronons, and if chronons are inherently irreversible, then the future is not a fixed destination, it is a field of potential chronon geometries, some more probable than others, all dependent on what crystallizes now. This is where science meets destiny. Not in a mystical sense, but in a dynamical topology of possibility. And just as a geographer maps terrain, future temporal scientists may map chronon topologies, regions of high transition density, loops of causality, bottlenecks of probability. We might even develop chronoscopes, devices that analyze the structure of the local chronon lattice, detecting resonances that predict future alignment paths or past interference patterns. Such tools could transform everything from weather forecasting to personal decision-making. And yet, the deepest implication remains philosophical. If time is quantized, if the universe unfolds one irreversible chronon at a time, and if consciousness participates in the selection of each unfolding, then meaning is not optional. It is baked into the system. Your life, then, is not just a series of events. It is a trajectory through the Chronon lattice. Every choice is a crystallization. Every action is a pulse that echoes into the lattice. Every intention shapes the geometry of what will be. You are not merely alive in time. You are alive with time. And time, in turn, is alive through you. This video is for educational or entertainment purposes only, and information provided in the video may be incorrect. Like the video and subscribe to the channel for more such amazing videos.